Our guest is Ambassador Gabriel Silva. He's ambassador from the Republic of Colombia to the United States, former Minister of Defense, and former CEO of the National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Dennis. Thank you for having me.
It's so exciting to have you here because one of the articles that I have right in front of me here, it says, showcasing Colombia's economic miracle. Talk a little bit about the successes and the miracle.
Well, Dennis, I think that it's really a miracle that was achieved with a lot of sacrifice, a lot of effort. In the last decade, Colombia was able to defeat crime and violence in a very, very important way. We still have some problems, but it's a completely different country, a new Colombia. And the confidence that arrived with this change has brought in investment, big companies, a lot of interest. We have both Colombian investors coming back and thousands of American and foreign companies coming in to invest in the country.
I love the phrase, the new Colombia. That's a nice phrase. Third largest economy in South America, is that true?
Yes, we now surpass Argentina, and we, after Mexico and Brazil, we are the third largest, and we are growing at 6% per year.
6%. We would be happy to have 6% here, huh? What's the foundation of the economy? The imports, the exports, what's happening there?
Well, Colombia is a very diverse economy. We have a strong agricultural sector. As you know, we have our coffee, the best coffee in the world. But in the last years, the mining and the oil sectors have grown significantly. Also, the manufacture, light manufacture, and we have a very strong presence in the regional markets. So it's really a very diverse and balanced growth.
I read someplace where maybe 10 or 12 years ago, investment was maybe $1 million or a couple of billion, per year. Now it's just going through the roof, isn't it?
Well, 20 years ago, when I was ambassador the first time,
yes,
and I had more hair and less weight.
Happens to all of us.
The average foreign direct investment in Colombia was in the order of $1 billion, 1.5. Last year was almost 18 billion. So it's really a tremendous change. And it comes from everywhere. Unfortunately, we are seeing other regions different than the US and other countries taking advantage probably in a more aggressive way.
Finally, the FTA agreement between Colombia and the United States has been signed, ratified. What does that mean to both countries?
Well, Dennis, this means a lot of jobs, first of all.
Jobs?
Yes, jobs. In the case of Colombia, we expect to have at least 250,000 jobs, new jobs, associated with the development of the free trade agreement. And also we expect that in the US, Colombian trade and Colombian market will create a lot of new jobs and opportunities for Americans.
You kind of made a reference to this a little earlier in the conversation, that maybe in the past there was a stereotype toward Colombia, which was drugs and violence and human rights. But now it's education, it's technology, it's energy, it's culture. A vast change in 10 or 12 years, huh?
Yes, I think that we have to recognize the leaders of that change. President Álvaro Uribe and his team, actually part of his team was current President Juan Manuel Santos as Minister of Defense. I was also Minister of Defense of President Uribe. So in those 8 years of his two governments, his stamina, his leadership, and his commitment to evolve from a country that was almost at the brink of failure into a vibrant and peaceful nation. I think that his leadership is one of the key factors to understand what has happened.
The United States has played a role there, huh? And aid money and defense or military money, specifically targeting the war on drugs and the drug cartels, and also the insurgency. This has paid big dividends, hasn't it?
No doubt. The relationship with the U.S. has been long-standing. Colombia fought side by side with American soldiers in Korea. Colombia was the first country of the Alliance for Progress of President Kennedy. Colombia,
that's
Colombia is part of the group of the peacekeeping forces in Egypt and Israel. So we have been an active member of the international community and very close aligned with the U.S. In recent years, the U.S. helped Colombia in a very important way through Plan Colombia, was the way in which we channeled the technology, the training, and the resources provided by the U.S. that made a huge difference. Of course, the burden is on Colombians, the responsibility is on Colombians, but the help and the friendship with the U.S. made a huge difference.
Let me ask you this, Ambassador, before we go to the break. FARC is the name of the insurgent guerrilla group. How does that stand right now, and what are the hopes for the country that, although it does exist in some areas, that it's not as much of a huge headache, would be putting it mildly, to the government, huh? And the people?
I think that we all want to have, or get to the point in which we don't have any more FARC, any more organized crime. The change has been very significant. The FARC was 24,000 members 10 years ago. Now it's close to 7,000. And they are confined in very remote areas, but they're still there. So we continue our effort with an open door if they decide to understand that they are already fitted to come back into society. Colombia is a generous society and is willing to have them surrender and find a peaceful solution and an end game in which they come back. If not, we'll get there through other means.
Let's take a little break right now and say that we're talking with Ambassador Gabriel Silva. He's the ambassador from the Republic of Colombia. Sit tight, back on the other side. This is America.
This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotendaro Family Trust.
Mr. Ambassador, let's talk a little bit about the Summit of the Americas. I gather that 33 of 35 leaders in the area attended. I suppose the question is, I hate to do it backwards, but who didn't attend?
Well, President Chavez from Venezuela, his health is in a difficult situation, as you know, and for medical reasons, he excused himself. He was represented by his foreign minister, and also the president of Nicaragua, President Ortega. We don't know exactly why he didn't make it, but they were the two that were absent. But we had a very good crowd and a great attendance.
What you know, it got all confused in the media here, and we didn't understand. What was the agenda of the summit?
Well, I think that the agenda was a very relevant agenda. For example, infrastructure. How can we connect our electric systems, the grid? How to increase our use of local energies and alternative energies. We had also, as a topic, how to fight poverty and create jobs. And we had, at the side of the summit, the gathering of 150 American CEOs with 150 Latin American CEOs of the first-rate level. Actually, one of the most difficult problems that we had is where to park the private jets because Cartagena Airport was too small.
That's a problem.
But we had this dialogue between the leaders, the political leaders, and the business leaders that also enriched dramatically the success and the outcome of the summit.
One of the things that I was keeping an eye on is some thoughts within the countries of South America that had to do with the decriminalizing of at least some drugs, of which Obama and President Obama and his administration didn't even want to go there. And then also immigration was something that was was on the agenda. Tell me what the thinking was in South America, Latin America, and how some of that was handled and resolved.
Well, President Santos presented the concept of discussing in an open way the successes and the failures of drug policy in the last 20 years.
The war on drugs, they
Yes.
say, yes.
And with the idea that we need to be more successful. And with an open mind, considering in an objective way which policies work, those that don't work, and try to find a new basket of solutions. And among them, we should discuss decriminalization of some drugs. It doesn't mean that we are advocating legalization or something like that. We think that we need to polish and improve the effectiveness of our drug policy, and that was the aim. And I think that we achieved something very important, the legitimacy of the topic. The topic is now legitimate. We need to talk about it. We can openly discuss it, and that's a very important achievement.
How about immigration? What was on the table there?
Well, I think that immigration was on the table because some countries feel that certain aspects of U.S. immigration policy, particularly certain aspects in certain states, is discriminatory and it doesn't respect international law practices or the respect for due process. So there's a concern, and it was openly aired by some of the presidents.
What would you say, because it certainly never ended up in our newspapers and our television, what would you say were the successes of the summit?
Well, for Colombia, the first thing is we had for the first time in history, a U.S. president staying 3 days and highlighting with his presence and staying overnight how safe and how open and how different is the new Colombia.
Yes, the new Colombia.
That was a tremendous benefit for Colombia, for Cartagena, for all of us. On the bilateral side, we also agreed with President Obama on launching the implementation of the free trade agreement this coming 15th of May. So it was a tremendous achievement. On the multilateral side, I believe that the commitment to a very specific agenda in terms of looking for a stronger integration of our infrastructure, energy, environment, and also dealing with the challenging issues such as drugs and immigration in a constructive way. I think those are the most important successes.
Obviously, and I have to raise this with you, of course, terrible disgrace and distraction because of the Secret Service and the military scandal that happened there while the president was there and while the run-up to the summit. How do you see it as a person and as an ambassador from that country?
Well, it was a very unfortunate event. It was the fault of a few individuals that misbehaved, and we don't see that as beyond that. We were sad in a way because a lot of what was achieved in the summit, a lot of the wonderful things that President Obama took to Colombia and we achieved with him and his government were obscured by this scandal. So we're more sad than anything else.
There was an article in the Washington Post that you took great exception to, and the key sentence in the article was Cartagena is swimming in prostitution. And you wrote a letter to the Post. Obviously, the people in that area, that city, and the people in Colombia are angry about the whole incident. Huh? It took a lot of the shine off the summit and off Colombia.
Well, I think that the coverage was quite unfair. These kind of things are attractive for certain type of press, and the exaggerations were immense, and people felt insulted, in particular because of the way in which some of the coverage presented our realities that are not different from other places.
Were you afraid that the old stereotype of drugs and violence was being replaced by a stereotype of Colombia and prostitution?
Well, you know, since I was an ambassador the first time until every day today, or now in this time, that's 20 years, we have been fighting stereotypes. And this is another one that we'll be able to overcome because the reality is so strong. The reality is an economy that grows, a country that has turned peaceful, that is receiving 1 million plus visitors a year, a country that is offering huge opportunity for investors and for American companies and American products. So that reality is really what matters, and we hope that it's going to stand in front of all this.
Did Colombia ask the United States for a letter of apology?
Not really, because it's not the fault of the U.S. It's the fault of some individuals that really made a mistake.
Let me just ask you a couple more questions on that. And the parallel in my mind was the conversation about, and I'm serious about this piece of it, talking about decriminalizing some drugs, and then also looking at prostitution in Colombia is legal. Is there any parallel there? I mean, if prostitution is legal, obviously it works because of many factors, one of which might be taking the criminal element out of it. Is there any parallel that I can see between decriminalizing prostitution, decriminalizing drugs?
Well, I don't really know much about that topic, but I have to tell you that decriminalization is an option to consider in the issue of drugs, but we're not advocating that option. Right. We have to evaluate. But I don't see that really a parallel between the two phenomena.
You are very clearly on record if you say if we had lost the war on drugs, we would have lost the country, huh?
Absolutely. And I was National Security Advisor to President Barco before I was ambassador. And I can tell you that when we left the office, we never knew if we were going to arrive alive at home.
Oh, Lord.
And
oh, Lord.
That was the kind of situation. When a judge issued a subpoena, we have to send him abroad because if not, he will be killed.
Oh, Lord.
Now, Colombia has a very strong judicial system. It's capable of enforcing our laws and protecting our population. It's a completely different country. And for me, having lived through all that process, it's quite a relief to see that my kids and my grandkids are going to live in a completely different nation.
I want to ask you one more question before we move on, and I know that you want to move on, and I want to move on. Colombia is a Catholic country. Prostitution is legal. Nobody has ever talked about the morality of the situation vis-a-vis this whole incident. I'm wondering how that goes down with such a Catholic country and with the leaders of the Catholic Church there.
Well, you know, faith is so personal, and conflict between personal behavior and beliefs and morals happen everywhere. And it's not uncommon to see everywhere in the U.S. and Colombia, everywhere, that there's a contradiction sometimes in between human nature and what humans or people say they believe into. So that contradiction is almost everywhere.
Will some good come out of this whole thing?
Well, I think that what we achieved at the summit is permanent. The implementation of the FTA is going to create hundreds of thousands of jobs in America and in Colombia. The Colombian market is open for American products. The U.S. market is open for Colombian flowers and fruit and coffee. And so I think that in the end, all this will be like anecdotes that will be surpassed by realities.
Population of Colombia is what?
46 million.
46 million. And if you could kind of draw a parallel, it's about the size of what one of our states, maybe?
Probably a little larger than Texas and part of California.
And how about surrounding countries?
Well, we have access to the Pacific and to the Caribbean, as the U.S. And we have 6 bordering countries, but actually if you include our maritime borders, we have almost 12 countries that border with Colombia. And you know, not only the size of the country, both in territory, diversity, and population, but also how it has changed in terms of population and income per capita. Colombia doubled its income per capita in a decade.
Wow.
So we have a very large middle class. You know, Colombia is larger than most of Europe, with the exception of France and Germany, and of course the UK, but we are larger than many other of the countries in terms of the economic power of Colombia, or the economic size of Colombia.
What's the like the primary challenge for President Santos?
I think that to keep our efforts to defeat what is remaining of terrorism and organized crime. That's the first challenge, and he's doing a great job at it. As you know, in the past 2 years, many of the heads and the organizers of these groups have been captured or killed in combat. So we continue that effort. The other important aspect is to translate all this growth into social benefits, and also he's working very hard on it.
There's still poverty?
Yes, we have, of course, poverty, but we were able to move a significant portion of our population in the last 10 years out of poverty. To give you an example, Colombia's middle class is today close to 20%, 25%. It used to be less than 10%. So it has changed dramatically. And President Santos put in place a series of programs: land reform, land restitution, reparation of victims of violence, to heal socially the country and to move ahead.
Bogota is the capital, right?
Yes.
And tourism, big business now, huh?
Colombia was off the tourist circuit for many years. And now we have the cruises coming to Cartagena.
Yeah.
More than 1 million plus tourists per year, and growing almost at 20% per year. One of the strongest sectors in the economy now is hotel and services. So it's booming.
The United States became distracted with Afghanistan, Iraq, the Arab Spring, Asia. South America kind of moved on and alone, didn't it? Huh? I mean, we have to be honest.
You know, the challenges for a superpower of the size and the relevance of the U.S. In this new world are quite dramatic. And you have so many issues on so many fronts. And so it's healthy to have this situation in which we understand that we need to move ahead and have a healthy relationship with the U.S., a constructive one, but not only...
but not a dependent one.
Not a dependent one.
Yes.
Exactly.
So you have new partners, both political and economic. Huh? China's in there big time. Iran, India.
I think that the case of China is very relevant in terms of trade, less in terms of investment. The case of Iran is really very limited, the influence or the presence, only to a very few countries.
Yeah.
And I think that we are looking at everywhere. In the case of Colombia, for example, we signed 15 free trade agreements in the last decade.
Thank God we came on board.
You know, that was very important for our bilateral relations.
Yeah, but you've been out there making friends and forging economic partnerships. The relationship between the United States and Colombia is long-lasting and very important, huh?
It's very close, and not only in terms of economic and regional interests, but also globally. Colombia is part of the UN Security Council. We have been voting and working with the U.S. in very difficult, critical issues, such as Libya, such as Syria, Iran. We have been working hand in hand to promote democracy. We support the efforts of the U.S. in Afghanistan, and we are quite involved in all levels of the relationship. For me, it's also very refreshing, because when I was ambassador 20 years ago, the only issue was drugs, and more drugs. My interlocutors were the DA, the FBI, all that crowd that I love, because they have been very helpful for Colombia, but we wanted to diversify our agenda.
Yes.
Now we talk about energy, environment, global politics, and many other strategic issues.
Let me pick up on that thought, and we just have a minute or so left, Ambassador. Your reference a couple of times, and just including now, to the fact that you had been here before, a number of years ago. From your point of view, How has America changed? What do you see as you look at us?
Well, I have admired the U.S. all my life. I came to college here. My oldest son was born here. I have businesses in this country, so I am biased. I love the U.S. But I have to tell you that I see a dramatic change after 9/11, and understandably, but it has turned the country a little bit paranoid, and people a little bit paranoid. They have a strong reason for it, but I think it's time to start seeing the world differently, because the successes are there. I mean, the U.S. has been successful in defeating the terrorists.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your
much.
time. This was just a wonderful education.
Thank you for having me.
For information about my new book, The Chance of a Lifetime, and online video for all This Is America programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net. This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotondaro Family Trust.